Hello learners, these are the first 12 chapters that I will be summarizing for you just to assist you as you go through your book. First things first, the narration in Life of Pi is through two narrators, Jan Martel in cursive writing and the adult Pi who relates his story to Jan Martel in normal writing. Jan Martel's cursive writing is also found throughout the novel, where he inserts himself into the very story that he is telling. Although the novel has 3 parts, it really starts with the author's note. The author's note is non-fictitious and also fictitious. There are parts that are real, that are from the author's life, and there are parts that are just from his own fictitious story. So it is both fictitious and non-fictitious. He first starts by telling us about how his second book did not do well in 1996, and that after that he decided to then write a book that was set in Portugal. Because he had some money, he flew from Canada to Bombay in India, where he thought he would write well, on holiday. But his book sputtered out and died, and he decided to then send the notes of the book to an unknown or a fictitious address in Siberia with a fictitious return address because he did not want to have anything to do with the book again. But he did not want to lie to people about what he was doing because he knew that there would be repercussions for that. So he stuck with being a writer, and a lot of people wanted to give him their story until one day when he was in a restaurant and he met someone who said that he would give him a story that would make him believe in God. The meeting between the writer and the elderly Francis Aridubasami, Pi's Mamaji, happened in Pondicherry at an Indian coffee house. As soon as Francis Aridubasami heard that the author was a writer, he told him that he had a story that would make him believe in God. He told him about Zoo Town, and he told him about Pi Patel, and he directed him to Pi so that he would get the story that he was talking about. So later the author looked in a phone book and got through a lot of Patels, calling them to find the Mr. Patel that he was looking for. When he found him, he had kept old notes and newspaper clippings that had yellowed of his story. And as Mr. Patel told him his story, the author decided to write it in the first person. The writer ends the author's note by thanking several people. He thanks Mr. Aridubasami, who led him to the story. He thanked the 3 Japanese officials who ended the story, and he also thanked the Canada Council for the Arts, who gave him a grant to bring the story together. In the first line of chapter 1, the adult Pi says that his suffering left him sad and gloomy. He was referring to the suffering that he had gone through at sea with a Bengal tiger in a lifeboat for 227 days. These had left marks even on his life as an adult. He mentioned the studies that he followed, the religious studies that he did, the zoology studies that he did at the University of Toronto. He mentioned what he wrote about in both those disciplines. Pi studied the three-toed sloth in his zoology studies. He mentions how it has a good-natured smile forever, how it lives in perfect harmony, how it's a vegetarian, and we learn that it calmed him down. He also says that he never had problems with his fellow scientists, something that is remarkable and something to remember, because he was a religious person, but he also had no problem with science. He could use them both in his life. Pi was a very good student at university, winning all the possible awards to be won, except that he didn't get the Governor General's Academic Medal. He lost it to a boy that he describes as pink, who was competition to him. He describes his life as a memento mori painting that reminds people that there is death. And then he would mock the skull on the painting by saying that you've got the wrong fellow. You may not believe in life, but I don't believe in death. Move on. Because he had been able to live when people would have expected him to die. When it was only natural for him to die, he was able to survive. Pi had a bucket list. He wanted to go to Oxford, and he wanted to go to Mecca. He wanted to go to Varanasi, to Jerusalem and Paris, places that showed what he believed in, things that he valued. He valued education and he valued religion. Mecca for Islam, Varanasi for Hinduism, Jerusalem for Christianity, and Paris because that is where his name came from. In chapter 1, we learn that Richard Parker has stayed with Pi and he'd never forget him, even in his dreams and nightmares. He still cannot understand how Richard Parker could just abandon him unceremoniously without any sort of goodbye and looking back. He says that pain is still unbearable. He mentions the doctors at the hospital in Mexico, how kind they were to him, and the other patients, how they would come and hear his story, even though they could not speak English and he spoke no Spanish. He mentions how within a couple of days he could stand and make steps and started to heal. And he was shocked by a burst of water the first time he opened the tap. How when he went to a Canadian restaurant and ate with his fingers, he felt triggered when a waiter commented about it. And he felt wounded. He rounds off the chapter by saying that the words of that waiter were like nails being driven into his flesh, and that he decided to use his knife and fork, instruments that he had hardly ever used. Chapter 2 is the author's description of Mattel, how he looks like, how he has grain at the temples, and that he can be older than 40, and that he speaks quickly and, with an expressive face. Chapter 3 is about how Pi was named after a swimming pool, even though his parents never took to swimming. He tells about Francis Basami, who was his father's business associate, who, as a young man, long before Pi was born, was a champion of all South India and was a competitive swimmer. He looked the part with his thick chest and skinny legs. And he had tried to teach Pi's parents and his brother Ravi how to swim, but had failed. However, when Pi was born, he became a willing learner. Pi's swimming lessons started when he was 7 years old and started in shallow water and progressed to the ocean. He went with Mama G 3 times a week throughout his childhood, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. By the age of 13, Pi swam 2 full lengths of credible butterfly in the ocean as a gift to his aquatic guru Mamaji. Beyond the activity of swimming, there was the talk of it. It was the talk that Pi's father loved. The more vigorously he resisted actually swimming, the more he fancied listening to the talks about it. He had studied in Paris for 2 years and spoke about different swimming pools he had been to, including the dirty Bain Royal that smelled like a latrine. No swimming pool in Mamaji's eyes, however, matched the glory of the Pais in Moloto that Pai was named after when he was born 3 years after Ravi was born. Mamaji said that it was a pool the gods would have delighted to swim in. The water was so clean and clear you could have used it to make your morning coffee. It was the only pool that made Mamaji fall silent, his memory making too many lengths to mention. Mamaji remembered, while Pai's father dreamed. Pai's father found a huge brand new Pondicherry Zoo on the grounds of the Pondicherry Botanical Gardens rent-free when Pondicherry entered the Union of India on November 1, 1954. Before moving to Pondicherry, Pai's father had run a large hotel in Matrac, but he found the zoo because he loved animals. Even though he enjoyed the new business, he felt that the guests at the hotel were better because they left their rooms and tipped. The zoo guests were very particular about their diet, constantly complaining about the slowness of the service, and never ever left or tipped. They were also sexual deviants, either terribly repressed and subject to explosions of frenzied lasciviousness or plainly depraved, in either case regularly affronting management with gross outrages of free sex and incest. The Pondicherry Zoo was the source of some pleasure and many headaches for Mr. Santosh Patel, founder, owner, director, head of staff of 53, and Pai's father. To Pai, living in a zoo was like paradise on earth, and he lived the life of a prince that even a Maharaja's son did not have. His morning alarm clock was the sound of a pride of lions, and he left for school under the gaze of animals and begged from school to them. And he mentions that in zoos, the best times to visit are sunrise and sunset when the animals come to life. Pai believes that the argument against zoos is nonsense and is misinformed, like those people who are against God and religion. He believes that in zoos, animals are able to fulfill the two relentless imperatives of the world: the avoidance of enemies and the getting of food and water. For animals that are in a zoo, that is easy for them to get. A good zoo is a place of carefully worked out coincidence, exactly where an animal says to us stay out with its urine or other secretions. In the literature can be found legions of examples of animals that could escape but did not, or did and returned. There's the case of the chimpanzee whose cage door was left unlocked and had swung open. Increasingly anxious, the chimp began to shriek and to slam the door shut repeatedly with a deafening clang each time until the keeper, notified by a visitor, hurried over to remedy the situation. Pai also mentions some animals that left the zoo and came back. He mentions a herd of roe deer that were scared and they bolted out, but they returned to their enclosure. He also talks about a zoo worker who was walking to his work site at an early hour, carrying planks of wood, when to his horror a bear emerged from the morning mist, heading straight for him at a confident pace. The man dropped the planks and ran for his life. The zoo staff immediately started searching for the escaped bear, only to find it back in its enclosure. Pai argues that he knows that zoos are no longer in people's good graces. He says that religion faces the same fate. He says that he does not defend them, but he challenges those who are against them to close them to see if wildlife will survive what is left of the natural world. The Pondicherry Zoo now only exists in Pi's mind since it no longer exists. Chapter 5. Pi's name. As a child at St. Joseph's School, a boy referred to Pi as Pissing Patel, and the name soon caught on, and teachers as well as his brother Ravi started using this nickname too. Pi felt like the persecuted Prophet Muhammad in Mecca and decided to plan his escape and the beginning of a new time as soon as he went to higher school. When Pi went to a new school and the teachers asked students for their names, Pi quickly used the geometrical pi as his name. From then on, his name was respected even by his brother Ravi. He ends up by saying that he found refuge in this Greek letter. Chapter 6 is the author's observation of Pi and his kitchen. He says that he's an excellent cook whose house always smells of something delicious. And then he can cook Western dishes too, even though they are in India. He makes a sumptuous meal of macaroni and cheese for the writer. He can make better tacos than Mexicans. His kitchen is jam-packed with food that could last the siege of Leningrad, which lasted 872 days during the Second World War. Mr. Satish Kumar, the biology teacher, was a good biology teacher, communist and atheist. He was friendly and he had a smile always. He was shaped like a triangle. He had a head that was shaped like a triangle and a body that was shaped like a triangle. So he was shaped like two triangles. He was a regular visitor at Pondicherry Zoo and always left scientifically refreshed. When he visited the zoo, it was to take the pulse of the universe, and his stethoscope mind always confirmed to him that everything was in order. Pi was shy to approach him as he was a figure of authority and he was a little afraid of him. He had come to the popular rhinoceros pit to see Pig and Summit, who had a good relationship with goats, when he saw Pi and told him he came to the zoo all the time because it was his temple. Watching the relationship between the animals, he said that there would be fewer problems if politicians lived like those goats and rhinos. To which Pi, not knowing much about politics, said, "Religion will save us." Mr. Satish Kumar said that he did not believe in religion because it was darkness. Pi was shocked by his answer and thought maybe he was just being tricked. To him, darkness was the last thing religion was. But his teacher said that God does not exist, and he saw no reason in believing in something that could not be seen when there is a scientific explanation of reality and no sound reason for believing anything but our sense experience. He later told Pi that reason is his prophet and that God died when he was sick with polio, and he had prayed but he was never healed. He said that medicine is what healed him. He told Pi that some people say God died during the partition in 1947. He may have died in 1971 during the war, or he may have died yesterday here in Pondicherry in an orphanage. That's what some people say, Pi. When I was your age, I lived in bed, wracked with polio. I asked myself every day, where is God? Where is God? Where is God? God never came. It wasn't God who saved me. It was medicine. Pi just thought polio was a terrible disease if it could kill God in a man. What if his words had the effect of polio on him? What a terrible disease that must be if it could kill God in a man. He became Pi's favorite teacher at Petit Seminaire, and the reason he studied zoology at the University of Toronto. He felt a kinship with him. It was his first clue that atheists were his brothers and sisters of a different faith. Pi did not mind atheists but agnostics. He said that to choose doubt as a philosophy of life is like choosing immobility as a means of transportation. In chapter 8, we learn why the most dangerous animal in a zoo is man. People are cruel and feed dangerous or rotten objects to animals, sometimes thinking they are helping and at times deliberately wanting to see how they will react. The cruelty is often more active and direct. Sometimes animals are poisoned, smashed, poked, etc. They weren't sadist though at Pondicherry as they were sometimes at other zoos. Just beyond the ticket booth, Pi's father had painted on a wall in bright red letters the question, "Do you know which is the most dangerous animal in the zoo?" An arrow pointed to a small curtain. There were so many eager, curious hands that pulled at the curtain that it had to be replaced regularly. Behind it was a mirror. On one Sunday morning, Pi's father decided to teach them a serious lesson and called them. Their mother was very reluctant and unhappy about this. He wanted to teach them a lesson about how animals are not human beings. He was teaching them the lesson about anthropomorphology, which means that people will see animals as they see human beings, and not realizing that animals are animals and can never feel like people or see people as people see them. Pi's father had made sure that Mahisha, a Bengal tiger, had not eaten for 3 days, and he demonstrated how swiftly it would break the bones of a goat and eat it. And in that, he taught them a lesson of how dangerous a tiger was. Them that he wanted them to understand that under no circumstances were they to touch a tiger, and they agreed. And he went on to teach them about other dangerous animals in the zoo, ending with guinea pig that he said were only dangerous when in the wild. Chapter 9, Flight Distance. Getting animals used to the presence of humans is at the heart of the art and science of zookeeping. An animal's flight distance is the minimum distance at which an animal wants to keep a perceived enemy. The tools of diminishing this flight distance are the knowledge of an animal, food and shelter that is provided, and the protection that is afforded to the animal. When this works, the result is an emotionally stable, stress-free wild animal that stays put. Pi's father was a zookeeper that was good, who was attentive to his charges, and they in return multiplied some to excess. There are 3 reasons animals escape from a zoo. Number 1, animals that are kept in unsuitable enclosures. Number 2, wild animals that are captured when they are fully mature. Number 3, animals that were bred in zoos and have never known the wild, that are perfectly adapted to their enclosure and feel no tension in the presence of humans, but have moments of excitement. Animals don't escape to somewhere, but from something. They escape when there's something within their territory that has frightened them. They escape if there is an intrusion of an enemy. They escape if there is an assault of a dominant animal. They escape when they are faced with a startling noise. Animals that escape go from the known into the unknown, and if there's one thing an animal hates above all else, it is the unknown. Escaping animals usually hide in the very first place they find that gives them a sense of security, and they are dangerous only to those who happen to get between them and their reckoned safe spot. Chapter 11. The female black leopard that escaped from the Zurich Zoo. It was winter 1933. She was new to the zoo and seemed to get along with the male leopard, but they fought. So she squeezed through a break in the roof bars of her cage and vanished in the night. Traps were set by people in Zurich who were afraid of this news that there was a female black leopard roaming, outside its enclosure. Not a trace of the leopard was found for 10 weeks. Finally, a casual laborer came upon it under a barn 20 miles away and shot it. The fact that a big black tropical cat managed to survive for more than 2 months in a Swiss winter without being seen by anyone, let alone attacking anyone, speaks plainly to the fact that escaped zoo animals are not dangerous absconding criminals, but simply wild creatures seeking to fit in. Chapter 12 is another author's observation of Pi as he tells his story. At times he gets agitated by his own story. His memory is an ocean and he bobs on its surface. And the author is sometimes worried that he may want to stop telling his story, but he wants to tell it and he continues to tell it. After all these years, Richard Parker still preys on his mind. He is a sweet man, and he prepares a South Indian vegetarian feast every time the author visits because he told him he loves spicy food, which was a stupid thing to tell and a complete lie. The author puts lots of yogurt into his food as he eats before his digestive tract starts to twist and groan in agony like a boa constrictor that has swallowed a lawnmower.